Donald Trump presented his energy plan today. Most plans of this sort are supposed to have specifics, and he left out most of those, but he did reveal his priorities and some of the philosophy guiding the choices he would make in terms of energy if he becomes president. And going by those, it's pretty grim. If you have any interest in human civilization persisting past the end of the next century, you're probably not going to want Donald Trump as president. First of all, he pledged to cancel the Paris Climate Agreement, rescind all job-destroying Obama executive actions, including the Climate Action Plan. We've talked a lot about the Paris Climate Agreement recently, and some of the things that Obama has accomplished in his Climate Action Plan, including recently adding some regulations for methane going forward. These are not incredibly strong regulations, but they are all that we have. And the Paris Agreement, while not enough, if all of the countries reach the marks that have been set for them, to stop the horrific, what we expect to be the future of climate change, it is our only chance as a civilization at present. And he says that he would take us out. Well, full stop, get rid of the Paris Agreement, get rid of any of Obama's executive actions involving climate action. The effect on the carbon level internationally around the world would be absolutely horrific. The long-term effect on our civilization would be devastating in a way that our society, our civilization has never experienced before. And that's just one of the things that he would do as president. One of his principles, going a little bit larger, is energy independence. And in fact, beyond that, energy dominance will be declared a strategic, economic, and foreign policy goal of the United States. It's about time. I don't even know what energy dominance means. I feel like if you have energy, if you need energy, you get the energy, you use the energy. I don't know what you're dominating with that, but he wants us to dominate. He specifically criticized the Obama administration for keeping certain federal lands and waters off limits from drilling, including parts of Alaska and the outer continental shelf. Trump also attacked Hillary Clinton's proposals to regulate fracking. So the very small little things that Obama has done and Clinton might do as president to stop us from accelerating jumping off the cliff in terms of carbon, he would get rid of those as well. He said specifically, under my administration, we'll accomplish complete American energy independence. Complete. Imagine a world in which our foes and the oil cartels can no longer use energy as a weapon. It will happen. We're going to win.
Oh, my God.
And again, I tweeted about this earlier. Energy independence means nothing unless you are willing to say American oil companies are not able to sell oil on the global market anymore, and we are not able to buy energy or oil from other countries. So long as you're willing to do that, it doesn't matter if we produce all the oil that we need to power our country. And by the way, we produce more oil than any other country in the world. We produce a gigantic portion of all the energy we use. So long as that oil is then sold on a global market, we are not free from price shocks, from instability in the Middle East, or an oil glut that we're experiencing right now. It doesn't matter if we produce 120% of the oil that we need. We are still affected by the global oil market, unless he's willing to shut down oil capitalism.
In fact, John, Canada is an oil exporter, right? So they actually produce more oil than they use. They export it, but their markets are subject to the same price fluctuations as anybody's.
Exactly.
So it doesn't. So what he's saying is just fundamentally not brought up by the facts that are currently happening right now.
Exactly.
So I'm always amused by the energy independence. One, because it's, as you guys keep pointing out, it's a global market. So irrelevant to the price of gas completely. Canada, as they say, over 100%. We're at 74%, by the way. We produce 74% of the fossil fuels and the oil and the gas that we consume, okay? So that's actually a great number. But Canada's over 100%. So they should have the cheapest gas in the world, right? No, the gas's price is the same. It doesn't matter how much of the gas you produce. But the second point is, they keep pretending that it's our oil.
Yeah.
Like if we, and it is, it's under our ground, and the gas and the coal, it's under our ground. Maybe it should be our oil. But if we did that, we'd be called communists. No. We don't get to keep the oil. We're not energy independent. Oil companies and coal companies, they're the ones who have it.
Trump will tell them that they can't sell it to other countries.
What do you think for Venezuela?
Fox would go along with that.
Which would be so far beyond the socialism that Bernie Sanders proposes,
Right.
that it's unimaginable. It'd be Trotskyite, right? To say, okay, oil companies, you're now nationalized. That is the American people's oil. And congratulations, America, you're now energy independent because you get to keep your own oil.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't work that way. So that's why, like, when we say, oh, we're going to go invade Iraq, and then Trump has said, well, why don't we just take their oil, right? Who's we? No, ExxonMobil is going to get the contract. You're doing those wars not for the American people. We never got the Iraqi oil. Even if Dick Cheney got all of his dream was not for you to get the oil. It was for ExxonMobil to get the oil and for Halliburton to service ExxonMobil and make a lot of money. Yeah. That's what that dream was.
Exactly.
So all of this is complete nonsense.
Yeah. Now, look, that doesn't mean, since we're talking a lot about oil, that he doesn't have any ideas about other forms of perhaps alternative or renewable forms of energy. He says that his energy strategy does include nuclear, wind, and solar, but he wouldn't support them to the exclusion of other forms of energy, like with special subsidies as they have right now, since they're beginning as industries, that right now are working much better. He says in his speech that solar is far too expensive, of course, missing, as everyone in this country effectively has missed, the drastic lowering of the cost of solar. It's a national tragedy that the media hasn't made clear how much more cost-effective solar is than it was just a couple of years ago. And it is now a viable future for American energy. But if people like Donald Trump get into office, that is not going to be a priority.
What if it's cloudy, John?
What if it's cloudy? Well, you see, you get these batteries for when it's sunny, and you fill them up. So he also says, because the climate change is one big effect of the sorts of energy that we use, but there's also pollution, and there was acid rain, and all sorts of things like that.
John, what if... Go ahead.
No.
What if the batteries run out, John?
I don't actually have an answer for that. Okay. I don't know. Hopefully he does. He says that
it's a win
Trump,
for me.
It's a win for you, but not for wind. We're not winning with wind. He says the Trump administration will focus on real environmental challenges, not the phony ones, like climate change he's talking about there. We'll solve for environmental problems like the need for clean and safe drinking water. My priorities are simple: clean air and clean water. And he specifically said that he would take away the Obama executive actions that lead to clean air and clean water. But he would still go for it.
You don't think he's going to get that done? I think he's going to get it done. So what if he doesn't have a plan?
What if he doesn't?
We just had an idiot as president for 8 years. Like, it was so recent. We saw what happens when you don't have some grasp of it. If you are unprepared from a policy point of view, if you don't understand the world, which he doesn't understand, you guys just explained it. I mean, oil is a small part of it, but he doesn't get how markets work because he's not even that kind of businessman. That's not even the kind of business he does. We just had it, and we're running the risk of doing it again, but with extra arrogance.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, arguably worse. But that said, I'm coming around to Cenk's point of view on the danger of this guy. I mean, I was never overconfident. I never counted myself there. But man, his ability to turn things around that should be devastatingly, that should cripple a campaign, and he wins the day. I want to mention it in this. He had that moment where he rooted for the housing collapse.
Yes.
When millions of Americans lost their home and kids couldn't go and kids couldn't buy new shoes and people lost their houses, lost their jobs, and he's rooting for it. And Hillary Clinton handled it the way every politician would handle it, because it was her, slightly less effectively than an average politician would handle it, right? Mm-hmm. And he turned around and goes, we look for market inefficiencies and try to exploit them to make money. That's what businessmen do. Next question.
Yeah. And then we were done with it.
I kind of hope it happens.
Right. But he, so somehow, even though it's abhorrent, and we're not arguing about whether what he said or how he would handle it is abhorrent, and that person maybe gets to exist, but they don't get to be in charge, right, of everybody else. But he did it. He won it again. He turns it around because he has that effect that you talked about with Bernie. What was the Rand Paul quote? It was a good quote.
That Trump has truth-telling without the truth.
His truth-telling, that is truth-telling without the truth, right? You don't, and people love truth-telling, even though, and he has an ability to truth-tell without the truth, but people think they're getting told the truth. Well, and it feels candid, and he wins. And then just hearing these things that the Trump administration would do is alarming, not because of what it is, but just because of the words Trump administration.
I want to focus on one thing really fast, just because we talk about we talk about the long-term impacts of what happens if a terrible president gets into office, and our country can bounce back from a lot of things theoretically. We had the Great Depression, we had the Great Recession, even though in yesterday's show we showed you how the international housing market collapse killed apparently about 500,000 people from increased amounts of cancer.
And we even had 8 years of the Jenny Jones show we overcame.
Exactly, we overcame it. Okay, it was rough. Those were rough years. But in terms of this, when it comes to climate change, There are many scientists that believe that it's too late, that we have gone too far, you can't bounce back from it without some sort of technology being developed that we don't currently have. But if there is any chance, we need to take it now. If you wait 4 years, if you wait 8 years, not just not fixing the problem, but accelerating the problem, we literally might never be able to bounce back. It might literally destroy what passes for a civilization today, with huge migrations of millions of people being forced to leave the areas that they live in because now they can't grow any food, the coasts being swamped by water as the oceans rise. I mean, we're talking about the future of our civilization, and he thinks we need to accelerate the problem. We need to pump more carbon into the atmosphere, and that might be something that we can't, as a species, survive for 4 or 8 years.
So here's the thing I think we're missing, right? So we keep talking about, this doesn't hurt Trump, nothing hurts him, things that would level other people. It's the combination of a couple of things. It's how they cover it, right? So once you tell people, half the country, not to trust the news, don't trust the news agency. Don't listen to them, the mainstream, ABC, New York Times, Washington Post, even those corporate-friendly news outlets. When you tell them that they're evil and they're lying and don't trust them, well, guess what? They don't trust them.
And professors, college professors. All the smart,
don't
all the smart people.
anybody in
Scientists,
science don't trust. People at colleges, they're all liberal. Don't trust. And so that's what. So when I went back just yesterday and I started to read the way the New York Times covered Trump when he first came on the scene this presidential campaign, and it was they kept saying, well, when the media scrutiny gets on him, he won't be able to stand up to it. Well, he did, and the reason why is because the people who like him, you told them not to. They were told not to trust the media, so they don't trust that media anymore. Number two thing is that even when the mainstream media does cover Trump, they don't frame it correctly. I went to a Trump rally for the first time this week. And let me tell you something. I couldn't believe they didn't have a shower by the press room, so after each speaker, you could shower that shit off you. It was unbelievable, and I kept looking. For instance, this is how they started the rally. They had 5 women come on stage, a couple Hispanic women, and they started the rally by these Hispanic women saying how illegal immigrants killed their children. That's how they started it. They're crying, and I'm just looking at the reporters, and the reporters are very nonchalant, and I'm saying to them, like, do you not see how they're starting this? Why don't they just put a dead baby on the stage? It would be less manipulative. And there's like guys sitting next to me giving me the weird eye. I'm like, this is how they do this? It was mind-blowing. Then they had a black guy come on to say all lives matter. Then they have a woman come on to say women love it. It was black is white, up is down. And the media is sitting there like it's not a big deal. I remember when they kicked Jorge Ramos out of the first press conference that started this whole thing out, and Katie Tur went on MSNBC and said they're really nice guys. So the way the mainstream news media is framing this isn't anywhere close to what's really happening inside of a Trump rally. With the fact that they don't lead off by saying it's a hate rally shows that they're not covering it correctly, because that's what it is.
But
I give one more specific example there, because Ben talked about, look, he said, I was looking forward to the crash. And then so he comes out and explains, well, I was just, looking for a market opportunity. Well, that's when you're at a press conference. The press has to follow up with, so you were happy that 8 million Americans lost their jobs. That was a market opportunity for you. You were happy that we lost $2 trillion in retirement savings and the senior citizens of this country were devastated. You've got to ask that follow-up question. You have to. If you don't, that's what lets him be Teflon Don and go, oh yeah, market opportunity. Next. No, not next. You have to show the consequences of his actions and his speech, but they don't.
If you want that kind of journalism, you got to go to AM radio in Wisconsin.
Okay, last thing on the environment and Trump. So we're talking about wind energy, and he's like, that's terrible. It kills the birds, right? Okay. Yes. You know what kills more birds in America? Power lines. So I guess Donald Trump's against power lines. We shouldn't have any power lines at all.
Power lines kill
more birds than the windmills do.
How about cats?
Cats kill more than the windmills do.
How about conservative hunters?
Okay, well, that's probably true too. But my favorite.
Other birds?
No, it's better. Windows. Oh. Windows kill more birds than windmills do. Wow. Okay, yeah. So I'm so concerned about the birds because of the... No, you're not concerned about the birds. What, are you going to make windows illegal? It has nothing to do with that. And then finally, my favorite line in the whole speech was when he got all worked up about oil and how much he liked oil. And he called it very, very pure, sweet, beautiful oil. That's a quote. That's a quote. Okay.